Uno, two, tres, four.
Good evening, maayong gabi, good morning, maayong buntag. Welcome to this virtual event presented by TLDTD, Taludtod, a biannual journal for Filipino poets and poetry. My name is Nikay Paredes, and I'm one of the co-founding editors of Taludtod, together with my dear friend and award-winning poet, Paulo Miguel Chausas. I am also a poet, born and raised in Cebu City, educated and schooled in Manila, Metro Manila, and now I'm in New York City, where I work in arts administration. I want to thank you all for tuning in today, wherever you may be in the Philippines or the rest of the world. For the next hour, I'll be moderating a conversation with three poets whom we featured in our journal. They are Jan Dennis Destajo, Janice Lobo Sapigao, and Lawrence Larry Lacambra Ipil. This conversation is part of a three-part series, which constitutes issue 8 of Taludtod. I also want to invite you to tune in again next month in April for a lecture on poetics and narrative poetry by the esteemed poet and professor and national treasure Murli M. Alunan, who will be joined by Adrian Medina Pregonier and Michael Carlo Villas. And in May, for a poetry reading featuring Taludtod contributors from issues 1 through 7. If you want to learn more about our publication and our upcoming events, visit us at tldtd.org. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at TLDTD Journal, or write to us at hellopo@tldtd.org. Okay, I'd love to begin. Dennis, Janice, and Larry, I want to do something a little bit different. I want to start with the poems. And if I may ask you to read in alpha order, Dennis first, and then Janice, and then Larry. If you can just share and read the poems or poem that we featured in Taludtod, so you can just go one after the other. So yeah, Dennis, you have the mic.
Hello, good morning here and good evening there. So I'll be reading my work that was published in Taludtod. Is my mic okay? Sorry. Okay. So this poem is called Pole of Inaccessibility. In the middle of the Pacific, a junkyard for what allows the small in life. Another, a plastic bust, facing north, frozen in time by the white darkness of the Antarctic. It's one thing to define fragility by creating things set for permanence, or to say, we were here. But it will yet be the better demonstration compared to the promise of architecture. It's lasting provisional. You were never really here until the next one burns. That's it.
Janice, it's your turn.
Okay, my poem is called The Diaspora Almighty. My mom makes friends with the nurses, and together they make a country. She brings them food, and together they are a farm, a restaurant without pricing, a secret menu. I eat with her at a station labeled 17 or Room A, depending on the availability, and we are alone in a sterile hotel without walls but curtains. a luxury without the privilege. Each guest is a room open and observable. The nurses, they eat her food in a break room without us. My mom and her new friends eat lunch in separation. They are two countries apart, a people divided, a nation under no God, no mercy. I believe in my mother, the maker of the bommis, adobo and rice, of spaghetti and hot dogs, of Vienna sausages. The nurses pledge allegiance to their patients, their indivisible labor. When we call for someone to come help us, anyone, a nurse comes quickly, comes running. When a machine beeps out of rhythm in our church, nurses, they are the conductors with answers, priests to a high symphony, signing and singing all the liquids with long names. They call for the gowns, washed and warm, with liberty and phone calls with medicine everlasting, the diaspora almighty. And on the last day of chemo, the nurses take pictures and selfies with my mother, crater of Pinakbet and Lumpiang, Shanghai. The nurses are profiled, memorialized, and Mary. Let her be healed. And if we never come back here to infusion or oncology, let it be holy in the nurses' names. Amen.
My turn to read the poem that came out in TLDTD. This one is called Grief, and this is a poem written after at least a year or so of not being able to write. So I thank the journal for creating this space, and most importantly, the deadline that pushed me to begin to write again. Grief. I could say mask, memory, and then imagine that you would understand what I wanted to say. Or that I returned to the hotel I had stayed in, but watched it from the scene I had once watched from the window, that once, and imagined I could still wave, get out, stay in, or hello, that easy narrative of loss and return, that differently, that was no difficulty I could say. I was in grief. And if others imagine this hidden under watch the world, it was instead the world that was gone from me, as in childhood, a feeling first before the fact, touch, the outside only to the extent that it was familiar to what was in, meaning it had found the shape of longing, what was no longer there. And if this doesn't match your childhood, then I was not that kind of child.
Thank you, Dennis, Janice, Larry. I feel like I already need to take a breath. I want to begin after your poems by asking the three of you about these poems that you just read. I am stirred and remembered and remember rather just like my first encounter with your work and just like being really excited to share it. I feel like that has always been the impulse of Taludod also. Like the question that we ask ourselves is like, does anybody else need to read this? And hearing your poems again, I'm so glad that, you know, we found each other in that plane and are now going to talk about it. So my question, first question, where were you temporally, spiritually at the beginning of the writing of the poem? And where did you end up? Maybe Larry, you can start since you read last.
Sure. Oh, wow. I mean, just to respond to the poems of Dennis and Janice too. I didn't realize I needed to hear Vienna Sausage this morning. Oh my gosh. I wrote grief. In grief and coming out of grief. My dad had passed a year before, and I was back in Cebu. So I flew back to Cebu in COVID era times to his death. And I stayed on for a few months back in Cebu. And I could not begin to write about what was possibly and is possibly one of the most important things in my life, which was the passing of my dad. So to think about poetry, which has always been the one constant through the decades, and to suddenly feel like I wasn't sure whether I could write a poem about this was something. So I suspect, I don't know the details now, but I suspect this poem was written maybe a year after the death. I remember exactly where it was written. It was written in a notebook by hand, which is the way I usually begin those poems. But they end up nowhere until I am forced to sit down at a desk and gather all the scraps and then transfer them to a laptop. And then the kind of work of poetry on the page begins. I remember writing this because it was a trip. I was in Bantayan. Um, I was there with some friends. We were in this really nice beach house by the sea, and they had a desk that was right by the seashore. It's a beautiful house. And yeah, for 2 hours I said like, guys, I'm not talking to you. And I went to the desk in the corner. I gathered the poems because I was like, I own Nikkei poetry. So I sat down and I put these words on this from the page to the screen. And that's where it happened. So in a way, it began by this poem began with grief and ended by the sea. And there was found the one spot, I found the one spot in the house that had Wi-Fi, and then I managed to send the poem to Taludtod. That's where I was when I sent this work. This work came out in issue 5, I think. Yes.
Thanks again, Lar. Who wants to go next? Janice, Dennis. Where were you temporally, spiritually? Where'd you end up?
I can go. Dennis, do you want to go or should I go?
Yeah, sure. You can go.
Okay. Wow, listening to Larry makes me want to cry because I relate to you too. I feel like this question is bringing out so many things in me. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area in California, and I feel like I started writing this poem before I got to the act of writing it. I feel like I wrote this in so many different like different rooms with medical recliners while my mom was going through cancer treatment, specifically chemotherapy. And even though like chemo is called medicine for cancer patients, it's also like very toxic. So the thing that is supposed to heal them is also in many ways killing them, you know? And so, yeah, I feel like when I wrote this, I didn't want to tell anyone about like what was going on with my mom or my family, and much less with me, you know? I just felt like the way that I needed to be during this difficult time with my mom and my family was just to like be present and to like do the work of just accompanying my mom to her doctor's appointments, where I realized I could amplify a lot of the things that she said and repeat the things that she needed to her doctors and nurses. And a lot of those nurses were Filipino. And I'm just like really grateful that I feel like those nurses got to see her and hear her in ways that her oncologists and other like physicians didn't. And so yeah, I think like when I wrote this poem, I knew I wanted to be very present. I wanted it to be written in a very present tense, like as if I was still there doing this with her. And that's sort of what I want to do in whatever this like poetry project about like the medical industrial complex in the United States will be like. And so I entered the poem like kind of going back into those rooms all over again. And by the end of the poem, by the end of writing it or thinking that it was done or finished, I realized that even though I had started the poem not wanting to tell people what was going on, at the end, I wanted more people to know. I felt like if more people know what's going on with families who are experiencing a loved one going through chemotherapy treatments, I thought like maybe there's something here that could be like further accompanying. Maybe someone could feel less lonely in this situation. So yeah, I guess I didn't realize that when I was reading it, but with this question, it's bringing me out and back into those rooms. And it's kind of like another way to re-enter these hospital settings, which I really disliked. I like hated going to the hospital. But I feel like the poem allows me to enter in like softly and like just with my mom, like just with whom I loved. So yeah. That's what I think about this poem. Thank you.
Thanks, Janice. Jan, Dennis, you're up.
Yes. Um, actually, I can vaguely remember. But siguro two places. I was probably one doom scrolling in my bed with my phone, and another sitting in my office back when we were still working on site. And I think I discovered with the pole of inaccessibility um, with my additional interest in nakatambay always on Google Maps. And my work kind of requires me to always look at our lots and properties like in the architecture office using Google Maps. And I think I saw a YouTube video about the pros and of inaccessibility, and just that just prompted the I think the ironic thing about my work and how we somehow create spaces for people, but also at times it's inaccessible to most. And it also kind of relates to what I was feeling at that moment in the office, because the transition period from being a college student to an architect's apprentice is very different. I guess the workload is not totally different, but now you have responsibilities, your relationships are changing. And I think by the end of writing it, parang I thought na I just want to compress so much things in a short poem as much as possible. And I'm not sure if I achieved that, but yeah, doom scrolling at the office, I guess, was the place.
Dennis, I kind of want to latch on to just what you're starting to talk about. And when I read your bio for the first time, I was so excited to see that you're an architect. To the untrained, myself very much included, I feel like I understand it as this profession that concerns itself with, achieving a union between like function, but also aesthetics. And I want to ask you and invite you to talk a little bit about um, has your being trained in architecture service the writing of your poems? Like you're already talking about like compression and I guess making things fit. So yeah, divulge.
Yeah, for sure. But most of my, I think, college days was so like busy. Like I was always drawing, working on my plates along with the academic work. But I think poetry kept insisting itself on me, to me. And uh but I think the yeah, back going back to when I started working as an architect's apprentice. We call it an architect's apprentice because you need 2 years of professional work before you can call yourself an architect. Yeah. And when I was doing that, um, parang poetry kept bothering me while I was working. So parang everything is poetry all of a sudden. Parang when I look up in a construction site, there's dowels like mga bakal na nakalabas na hindi matatapos. And when I walk home, the highway is so red, so gray, so everything is poetry. And kaya I just read, I think, a work by Ben Lerner, nabasa ko lang online. There's a line, new work niya, I think, that says, when everything is poetry, I know I am unwell. So I think in a sense, tama, it's correct, at least at the moment when I was figuring out my life. But also, people tell me sometimes na architecture is they talk about architecture, about how it's very fascinating field of study because it's literally creating something out of your mind, like mind to actual. And I think that's what I like about, in contrast to poetry, because I think in poetry there's the bitter logic, quoting one of my idols, that you can never to the exact translate what's in your mind into a poem. And it's totally different with architecture because you can never be wrong. It's always need to be to the exact millimeter. Failure is a crime. Can be a crime, literally. If a building falls down, it's on you. So so in poetry, the virtuality to actuality is like that tension. That's what I love writing about. And the good middle, I call it that good middle tension between poetry and architecture. And I think there's so much things to write about architecture, and talking about spaces, talking about my experiences, the politics of it, and all. And I think also with the poem that Talutod printed in your website, another big moment and the inspiration between the poem was, I was once in uh in an informal settler na community talking to the people, and there was once this construction worker who's working, his work is as a construction worker is the one demolishing their houses. So yeah, those contrasts, parang it's very difficult to tackle as an architect, but it's very also difficult to write as a poet, but it's also very poignant. Yeah. I hope it answers the question.
Of course, I mean, you've given me a lot to think about, but I also want to share the space with Larry and Janice. I mean, if you have questions for each other, feel free to interject at any point. But yeah, I guess I want to open it up now to.
No, I'm just to maybe jump in, just on this notion of rooms and architecture, right? Like hearing you, Janice, talk about your mom's experience and your experience with the mom makes me think about the kind of rooms the poem I read also came from. A lot of that poem had to do with my experience in COVID. Because when my dad was sick and I had to fly in, knowing that he could, die any day, it was actually during the time where we were still required to do a 1-week quarantine before we could step out of the hotel. So I was actually in what used to be the Marriott Hotel. It's now called Seda for those of you from Cebu. you would know that hotel. It's one of those old 90s hotels of childhood. So I found myself there for a week, knowing that any day daddy could go. But it also like really, I think it solidified me that not only the experience of pandemic, but like the experience also of diaspora, right? When your loved ones are far away from you, um, what does it mean to hold space and to hold space for feeling that comes from many places? Um, like what does it mean to write poems that are not actually situated in one place, that actually come from feelings of different places? And that's, I think, become a challenge for me and a pleasure in the writing of my poems. Poems for me are quite internal things. I love hearing I love hearing you talk, Dennis, because it makes me imagine how kind of easier it would be to locate poetry on a house or something more concrete. Poetry has always felt to me as something that's almost like within my chest, and I carry with it, and I am scared sometimes to enter that space because who knows where we end up when we enter that space. But I found myself writing in transitory spaces, in departure lounges, in beach houses that I don't own, and I'm just staying for 5 hours by the sea. But it's those almost transient spaces for me that are potential spaces for poetry. And maybe it's because I'm scared if I open the poem into the place of permanence or residence, I will not be able to really function as an adult anymore. So in a way, I almost feel like I steal those spaces and moments where I can go in. And when you go in, it's all hell breaks loose and everything's up for grabs. And the kind of world collapses into the poem. I don't know if I'm still making sense, but I'm also like really thinking about the poem that came up in grief, and I'm just like, where is that poem located? And it's located in the quarantine room. It's located in the beach I was writing in. It's located in, being back home and seeing my dad pass away. It's located in all those spaces, and they're not mentioned, but the poem is one space that is able to hold all of those time and dimensional collapses. Yeah. But Janice makes me think about also like all the nurses and hospitals are the rooms that a lot of Filipinos live in and work in, right? Those spaces of healing and caring, but of passing away too. And they're cold spaces too. And I feel like the Pinoy nurses always bring a warmth that those spaces need.
Oh my gosh, I'm thinking about so many things right now. I'm thinking also, I guess I just want to say, Larry, I'm sorry for your loss. Um, I definitely relate to you. My mom passed away during COVID, from cancer in April of 2020. And I think it was just such a hard time to lose someone, you know? And also like now that I'm thinking about grief, like it's also like it was such a hard time to like lose myself, you know? But I think that was the reality of the situation. And I think actually I was reading Dennis's chapbook too, and you had a line about how architecture controls what you feel. And I just never thought about it that way, you know? I never thought about how spaces can demand a feeling or command a feeling or create a feeling. And to hear you, Dennis, talk about like how constructing a building might be even more, not, I don't think the word you used was easy, right? But to construct something from your imagination is like akin to writing a poem, but yet the poem can never fully capture or document the feeling. So to me, I thought like, oh wow, is it easier to build a building than to build a poem? And I'm thinking about how funny that is and how, yeah, it can be really difficult, you know? And something I see also, Larry, in your book, maybe between like the three of us, because part of me wonders like, where do, like that question that Nikai asked to get us all into this room together was, where do Filipinos write? And my initial answer is like everywhere. But also I noticed that for the three of us, I think we do things with repurposing language and like renewing language or like redefining things. Like Larry, the photos that you use in your book, oh my gosh, I have so much to say about those photos. And yet so do you, you know. I also appreciated like the placement of the photos next to certain poems, and I wondered about like the ordering of things or like the ordering of space, you know, and how that can communicate like even more than the layers that are already like available through the text, you know. So I don't really have like a question, just a comment about like how I'm seeing these all of our words kind of like thread together in a way. So thanks, Nikai, for the space.
For sure. For sure. Janice, I was also thinking, so full disclosure to everyone tuning in, Janice and I saw each other in person, I think last week for a writers conference, Kansas City, Missouri. And I think it was really just our first time getting to just talk and, you know, tell each other about the stories of our lives and how we ended up where we are now. And I was really excited to hear from you, Janice, when you said that you were going to the Midwest and digging up archives. And I wonder too, I'm curious what you think about like Larry's book Experiment, because it really also is, you know, a project born from those photographs. And I'll show you the book now. This is Larry's book, Experiment of the Tropics, which I love, 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 love this poem. Lar, do you mind reading a poem from this book? I guess your choice.
Sure. Do you have a request?
Let's do the title poem, maybe the title poem.
Okay, let's do the very heavy title poem.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, that is one of the first poems that was written for this collection, and it eventually became the title track. The initial title of this collection was called There, THERE. I was interested in there-ness, as in like not here, there, as a kind of maybe reference to dislocation or diaspora and movement. But then a novel called There came out on the same year, and an amazing book. So I was just like, okay, I can't use There then as a title because like there's already There. So Experiment, you know, I was just like, so which poem in the collection sounds like a book title anyway? The Experiment of the Tropics. As a nest among the trees, as a garden among the bigger garden of the sea, mountain, view, as a wish that we're drawn to scale. So the idea became foldable, a mere scaffold, discarded for that long-lasting thing, that revivalist thing style, which as the master carpenter implied, went beyond road, port, nut, bolt, wharf, a nail in a railroad, a pipe that opened and closed, the central portico, the color and the texture of a solid colonnade of indiced silence, which was her sense of water flowing across the experiment that was the tropics. A riverbank made private, a theater of night guards, a soda parlor, of that foreign good whiskey tractor, red tin can with the picture of a scarab and a Quaker oath acquisition, that American thing, that good old good cheese and grape. There was a tennis court in the club where you hit the ball and nothing returned. We munched on its brandy biscuit. We ordered 2 of it. And reading the poem again, yeah, brings up a lot of things, especially in terms of our history in relation to the US. Um, I think a notion in this poem has to do with reading it again now. What's standing out is really that notion of acquisition that is part and parcel the impulse of empire to hold what it does not own and to call it its own. But then hearing it again now, as I'm looking back to this poem, I'm drawn to that final image of a tennis court and the club and a ball that's hit and nothing is returned. Which to me feels like the colonial, post-colonial condition, actually, where you give and the ball never returns because you're playing in a court that was never built in your favor. And yet, what does it mean to live with that history, right? And to engage with it and to reckon with it and to be angry about it, but also to love it because it is what has made you, is and has been for me the difficulty and the pleasure of writing poetry about history and the photograph and archives, because it brought me in close touch with what I felt had made me. But then and every Pinoy knows this, even if they're in denial, we are made out of empire and we are made out of a violent history. And that is why I think it is difficult for us to write about it, because if there's anyone in the world that is constituted by occupation, it is us who continue to be named after a king called Philip. And what does it mean to continue to name ourselves in that way is to continue to affirm, but also like to grapple and to like wrestle with everything that is so difficult to talk about. And that's part of our heritage, I think. And that's why I think we bring to it all that we can, grief, but also like a lot of laughter, because I think that's been part of our wonderful human response to everything that's happened. I don't know what material Janice is, I don't know, engaging in right now. I'd love to hear the kind of archives she is beginning to, excavate. Mine was an excavation of photographs from Cebu. So it was in my hometown from the Cebuano Studies Center. So it was in a way also a kind of return to the hometown, but a buried kind of hometown, which was found in its archives. So these are things that not all Cebuanos have access to or even want to access to. But these are spaces in our cities and our towns that hold memories. So I'm interested also in those archival spaces of our hometowns, our libraries that need help and renovation, and those spaces of memory, I like to call it. That was part of the enterprise of this book, a kind of homecoming, but also a discovery of a new part of what one called home. Janice, what are you whose ruins are you living in these days?
These days, my own. But I'm also, I guess I'm looking at so many things. I spent the summer in Chicago, Illinois at the Newberry Library, where I was a visiting scholar looking at mostly photos from, maybe you've heard of it, the Dean Worcester collection. A University of Michigan professor who took photos of Filipinos. And the photos are just like so problematic, like nobody is named. The captions are according to his perspective as a zoologist, not as someone who really like understood or sought to understand what was happening around him, what was happening there. And actually, what's interesting is there is no there, like that quote from Gertrude Stein was from when she lived in Oakland in the San Francisco Bay Area. And there's another poet, Filipino poet, Jason Bayani. He has a poem about that, like kind of talking back to Gertrude. And yeah, his poem is called, I just looked it up. It's called Portrait of Steph Curry as Mac Dre on an Oakland Mural. And just saying, like, these are some cultural objects that are objects people, sorry, well, people turned into, like, people that have been objectified, so into murals. And saying, like, these are part of the culture of this city. So anyway, I have been looking at the different holdings at the Newberry Library. I was telling Nikai about how I went to the site of the 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis. And I guess now I'm thinking too about like these photographs. And actually, when I was reading your book, I thought about like, what does it mean to develop a photo? Like, what does it really mean if people are placing onto it their own like misinformation or misunderstandings? Um, and then this also reminds me of Dennis's poem, in the middle of it all, a basketball court. Just the first line, without a single working ball in sight. I just thought about that, right? The space becomes like it's not used, right? Because it's if the ball is missing, then like what else can really happen there? So I don't know if I've answered your question, but those are thus far the ruins I've looked at, and I hope to look at more of the archives at the University of Michigan, the University of Minnesota, the University of Wisconsin, and back to the Missouri History Museum. I feel like I was telling Nikai, like I feel like the Filipinos who came to America to go and live in those places by themselves, like on their own. Like I get a sense of that as I travel through the American Midwest. Like, oh, I'm really the only Filipino here. So it's like a reliving of history in some way. Even though it's been really messy, but I've been finding a lot of like home, like in the mess. So I hope that answers both of your questions.
I'm just so moved by what you said, Janice, and this is something that I've been reflecting on a lot too. Like, I feel like thinking about like Pinoyness, Filipino-ness, and not knowing actually a lot about the Filipino-American experience. I am finding access to that kind of world through the Philam poets, yourself, other poets that we've chatted about last week. And to be very frank, I really have observed and detected a kind of like maybe like sadness, because I describe it in my head as this like fissure that happened in space and time, like we were from one place once upon a time, however simplistic that sounds, and then like there were these forces, external forces, really hard choices that we had to make, that our parents or our parents' parents had to make, that just kind of like made that fissure and divided us. And again, I'm grateful and really keep close to my heart the poems that you write and other Philam poets, right? Because I am learning so much about being Pinoy precisely because I am learning about that diaspora, and myself being already kind of like a part of that by electing to be where I am now. I feel very in between, but I feel a fullness just kind of like learning from those and not leaning into the belief of like, you're not Pinoy enough, you're not whatever those things are, that it just feels unproductive and banal and unthoughtful. But you also mentioned, and Dennis, there was the basketball court poem. I want to hear another one. Dennis, if you can read that. And it's from your book, Theory of Defensible, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Basketball.
Let
Go.
me
Very
open it.
also Pinoy.
Having trouble finding it. Okay, what I guess inspired this poem is I think it's a common practice in designing, or at least in most public spaces, for it to be multifunctional. There's always the multipurpose hall. It's a basketball court, it's a ballroom dance floor, and sometimes it's just nothing, it's just there. So uh, I made this poem into like somewhat critique to master planning in public spaces, since parang it's about lining up in a clinic and walking past a basketball court all the way far of the lot, na it's not really necessary to be on the corner of the lot, the clinic. So I guess I'll read it now. In the middle of it all, a basketball court. Without a single working ball in sight, appropriate line measurement and paint quality, only a slab of concrete and the steaming bodies buried underneath the swollen earth of a hungry city. I paced across and reminded of friends insisting that all boys share a dream, to hoop and only hoop for a living. Unlike Mike or the meme, I took no offense. What became personal upon reaching the queue was land use, or rather intent. Was it aggression, insecurity, or just plain ignorance over the basics of master planning? Not even my father and the other men who took his place gets to decide my shame. Who is this architect that thinks I and the two strangers who I assume are fathers, sitting beside me, are here to hide from the burning world in the furthest corner of the lot? It is no surprise for such a thing to be an afterthought. Only here where dreamers settle is a family health clinic less accessible than a basket with a lock on the net. Multifunctional over anything resembling a plan. Our waiting invoked a camera crew asking for permission. Just a few questions, they said, for the program's marketing. It wasn't the nerves or the needles that caused my being frozen, for only the doctor reasoned on my behalf and said, "Sorry, no one knows he's here." Yeah, that's it. And I think I also tried to tackle how um, the insecurities of men in general, on how they cannot um, on in terms of medical issues, parang they always, yeah, I can do this. I don't need a doctor. And like the there's always basketball, and parang lahat, every parang every guy wants to be a basketball player. At least in my circles, they say that men want that, but I don't. I guess I want that before, but not now. Um, and yeah, and there's there's a spaces where it seems like men try to hide, and that's why I think the one who designed the space is a man who wants to hide other men from that space, for that space. Kaya that's what I thought about writing it.
Whoa. I mean, whoa in a good way.
Thank
Maybe
you.
maybe just to respond, because I got the chance to read Dennis's work too before the chapbook came out, and I'm first time to kind of like talk to you actually, Dennis. So I'm really happy for this opportunity, because I feel like you are choosing to write about spaces that many poets in English do not usually write about. I think it's safe to say that. Um, your poems are navigate the crevices, the corners, the abandoned lots, the unfinished. Um, there's a deep love and fear for them. Right? I feel like your poems, that's where your poems live. But they're also very transitory spaces. Either because I almost get a sense they capture the kind of transitory that comes with living in Manila. I've always felt, and Manileños feel free to correct me. But there's a different sense of space that Manila people have. And I guess I'm speaking as someone who grew up in Cebu and then moved to Manila in college. And I really felt like iba to. Manila people navigate their spaces very differently. It's also very congested. So notions of privacy and space are very quickly, thrown out of the room. And yet there is space for thinking and feeling, right? And I feel like there is nowhere else to do that but on the public space. So that kind of public-private melding that I sense in Manila is I feel is very strong in your work. So I think I'm kind of curious to know if I don't know, internal migration does that figure in your mindset when you think about these poems? Do you love Manila? I think that might be my question actually. Yeah.
Love hate, I
Mm.
guess. For the past 3 years, I've been at home since the pandemic. We haven't returned to office for the longest time. But I have been here since I started college, which was around 2011, 2012. I came from Bicol, from Daet, Camarines Norte, northern town in Bicol. Um, I've Back then I was always fascinated in going to the city. Parang on like other Manila people, they usually tend to go to provinces or go to take their vacations elsewhere outside Manila. When I was in high school, I take my vacations in Manila, like to eat like McDo, ganun. We don't have McDo back then in our town, just Jollibee. And I guess that excitement, nadala ko pagpunta ng Manila. Uh, and also dahil architecture student, I've always wanted to see the differences in spaces. Actually, on January, it was my first time to go to Marikina Heights. I was really fascinated na, whoa, may parks. People are playing chess at night. People are singing. People are picnicking. And when you're in QC, parang unless you go on a dedicated park, that's really not, it's not a community park. And there's still so many things to discover in Manila. I think so. But I guess the difficulty with that is I sometimes lose touch with my B- Bicolano. It's hard to call myself Bicolano, I think. But yeah. And that's why I think I relate in a way also with Genesis, the book that I read, because yeah, uh, when I was in college, I used to buy my materials, and the sellers, the store owners were Bicolano. And when I tell them that I came from this place, they, no, you're not Bicolano because you're from that. I guess they treat that as Tagalog people. I understand Bicol, but I also can speak it very well. It's very like it's mostly accent rather than the actual words, but I understand it well, and I want to write about it, but I also can't. I don't know the proper grammar in the words, and yeah. Right now, I always think about this time in my life and how can I parang go back to those childhood. Actually, the cover of my chapbook is an abandoned house in my friend's subdivision in Bicol. Yeah. And also my friends don't really speak Bicol also. We're all from the same town, but we mostly speak Tagalog or English. And that's really sad, I think. Yeah. Manila is nice though.
Janice, I'm thinking about your book, Like a Solid to a Shadow, and it's a translation, right? Like there is a translator's note at the start. But it's like it's just it's tell us about this book, and if you can also read a poem from it. I'm also thinking, I have a question for you, because you in this book you transcribe tapes, right? And you describe it in the translator's note. But I feel like you have a particular relationship with just how the words sound, because you call Ilocano in your book a foreign language. Um, and yeah, if you can talk a little bit more about the book, share a poem from it, and then just speak to your relationship with how foreign words sound and how that becomes a poem then.
Okay, I also, gosh, I wrote this so long ago that hearing that, I'm like, oh gosh, I would never say that now. But to that, I'd like to add that English is also like a foreign language to me in some ways, you know? Even though I feel like, yeah, it just happens to be like, I don't know, sometimes I feel that the monolingual shame, you know? And I'm trying my best. Like I have taken Ilocano classes and I just end up laughing at myself and how much I don't know formally. And so yeah, this book was definitely written to process like disenfranchised grief. My dad passed away when I was 6 years old, and I didn't know him. I wanted to, and when I hear a lot of like family stories, a lot of my family members would say things like, "Oh, I wish you got to meet your dad," which is so disenfranchising, you know? And a lot of them would say, like, he was such a great man, he was such a great person. Um, and it just kind of makes me laugh because they don't say that about my stepdad. So yeah, men telling on men makes me laugh. Um, and I wanted to write a book from the fragments or fissures, I guess, of language and memory. I wanted to learn who my dad was, and I wanted to like transcribe every cassette tape that my dad left behind. He oh gosh, now I'm telling the story in fragments, but he courted my mom in like a long distance relationship from Saudi Arabia, where he worked for, it sounds like an engineering company or like an oil company. I don't know exactly, because no one wants to talk about it. So there's a lot of blank space in the book because there's a lot of silence. And there's a lot of like learning things about my family so many years after things had already happened. And I learned a lot of things. I don't know. I just learned that my family that I knew is a shadow family of my dad's first family in the Philippines. And nobody told me that. I had to find out on my own, through my Ilocano teacher, who was like a veteran activist from the Philippines, who was like who became obsessed with my dad's tapes like I was. But the difference was that he could fully understand. So I remember when I would bring my tapes to Ilocano class, he would kind of listen to them like podcasts, like, okay, I'm done with this one, bring me the next one. And I'm done with this one, so now bring me the next one. And I just thought he was helping me, but really he was listening and living for the story, you know? Um, and so I wanted to try to remember the words in Ilocano by like making stories out of the words and the sounds because it's such a phonetic language. And oh my gosh, I'm so should I read some of the small Ilocano poems? I'm so nervous to read to everyone here.
Do whatever
Because
feels comfy. Yeah.
I think like I should say that as I have gotten older, I like to convince myself that maybe the shame of not knowing a Filipino language fluently like dissipates. Um, Yeah, because I actually I teach, right? So I have a lot of Filipino American students, and a lot of them are they carry that same shame of like, oh no, I don't know this language, I don't speak this, my family judges me. And I am like always so quick to say like it doesn't matter, like you are still Filipino, you know? Um, but now in this room that is like a smaller audience, I'm like so nervous. Um, do I want to read those? Hold on. Let's see. Let's see. I think I'm nervous to read them. Okay, I'll read this one. Can I tell you the stories that? Can I read two? They're small.
Yeah,
They're like super.
go for it. Go for
One
it.
is the word buntog, which is too slow, which is what my mom would call my brother when we had to like hurry up and go to church, and she would be like, "Oh, your brother is buntog," and I was like, "What is that?" And it sounded so mean, but it also sounded like this. So the poem says, "Too slow, like the banana slug who cannot play hide and seek as well as she thinks, or my brother who sleeps counterclockwise." Because my brother was always like sleeping against the clock. Like I was like, come on, we have somewhere to go. So it made me laugh. Um, um, yeah, and then oh my gosh, the word taray, to run, makes me laugh too because but I guess I should say when I say laugh, I mean kinship. I don't mean like shame or like making fun of or teasing. Because like when I would hear these words in Ilocano, I would think like that's the word. Like taray is the word to run, not to run. You know what I mean? Like to run isn't the word. Like to run is the word for taray. You know what I mean? So I guess I thought of things in that way, but the definition that I wrote was sit back in the blocks, bottoms up until bullets propel you onto the track. I should say that I used to run track in high school. And so that word reminded me of when I had to run, and I didn't like it. I didn't like running, and I don't know why I did it. So, yeah, these word poems, like word definition poems, helped me remember the words.
Mm,
But really, it helps me remember the moment or the memory better.
mm.
So, yeah, thanks for listening to my um, attempted Ilocano.
Oh, thank you for sharing and being brave, I guess. No, I hear you. I am perpetually ashamed of my Tagalog accent, and you know, here we are. Um, I am looking at the time, and I am compelled to wind this lovely conversation down. But before that, I want to fling a final question to the three of you. Thank you again for sharing your poems, for asking questions of each other. Really, really lucky to be in this company. But what I wanted to ask was, I guess it's a two-parter. You can answer one, you can answer both, or, you know, can you share an early core memory with poetry? And also, who or what gave you permission to write? Um, the second question, Larry, something that you and I kind of like banter about too, when we encounter poems that are just astonishing and shatter us. You always say something that makes me laugh. You said, "Wala na nang hin." You did not ask permission. So I think that's where the permission comes from. So yeah, any early core memory with poetry, and who or what gave you permission to write?
Should I start this next?
Yes, please. Sorry. Yes, go.
Mine is complicated memory of a memory, of course, right? I will not answer the question simply. Um, one of the first poets that really made me want to write is a poet now based in Dumaguete. Her name is Mirna Peña Reyes. She used to live in the US, but then when she retired, she returned to Dumaguete. Her book is called River Singing Stone, and that book forms one of my core memories of poetry because it sort of gave me permission to write about parts of my life I thought were not worth putting on the page. When you grow up in Cebu or in many of the provinces of the Philippines where writing is something merely done by people in Manila or people in other countries, the encounter of someone writing about things that are very close to home is life-changing. And I think that book changed my life because it said you can write about the things that are happening around you. Mirna Peña Reyes's book gave me that permission, but I think the core memory of that core memory is maybe 15 years later when I am visiting Dumaguete. I meet her in person and I am scheduled to have dinner with her. But I meet up with a friend earlier that afternoon, and my friend on a whim, and he drives a motorbike, takes me to the nearest. He says he's taking me to a nice place, and I did not know he would take me to a waterfall. And the moment I see the waterfall, I mean, it's a scene out of an 80s movie, really. I jump out of the motorbike and then I go and jump into the water because, oh my gosh, a waterfall at 2 p.m. as a surprise. Um, and then later on that evening, I find out that that waterfall was the waterfall that River Singing Stone was writing about. I have dinner with Mirna Peña Reyes and my friend RV who drove the bike that evening. And in a way, that's the core memory, which is a memory 15 years after the real memory of starting to write poetry. And in a weird way, the permission comes from the waterfall, is my poet's answer, Nix. That waterfall gives me permission to write.
Mm.
Yeah. Sorry, I went there.
No, I know you would. I knew you would. I also remember in I think the opening poem and experiment, you mentioned this place, Bulok Bulok, and I was with my family. We were going to Moalboal, and then we never take that route, like that mountain route. Like you can take the scenic route with the sea. And then I saw Bulok Bulok there, and then I was also freaking out because I was like, "That's what was in Larry's poem."
No, and
So
I feel
yeah,
like it's when the real world, it's when the world affirms it. I feel
yeah,
like it's when the poems come first, and then
mm,
we meet the world, and the world says yes. It's a weird thing. I think we think that the world comes first and then poems come after it. But in certain cases the poems come first as kind of precursors or appetizers to the world when the
mm,
world arrives.
mm,
And we both say yes, right? Like we say yes because like, oh my gosh, it's the waterfall, but then it's also like it's the waterfall saying, uh-huh. Go on, proceed, continue.
mm, yeah,
Which I mean and it gives us permission
yeah,
to write.
yeah, yeah. Dennis, your turn.
Um, core memory with poetry. I would say um the my first initial in English poetry at least
Mm-hmm.
was in my third year of high school, I think. The I'm still using it today. I'm still studying it. Like as of now, yung the O2 aggression earned. I mean, I think madami siyang laman, madami siyang madami pa rin siyang sinasabi until now in terms of how to write, what to write about, how poets see. But that didn't really, I think, allow me to write because that was a different kind of poetry, like the different language of it. Medyo cheesy, I think the other answer is because it was only to publish an acrostic poem in a high school journal to confess to someone.
Aha.
like like their name, the first letter of their name into an
Mm-hmm.
acrostic poem. And yeah, I think poetry is a confession. And like that's why I during my early days in college, I gravitate towards like mm, lyrics of Panic at the Disco, like Fall Out Boy, those kind of bands. Like parang they really say what they want to say. They're not really poetry, but I want to consider them as poetry. But especially knowing that, oh, you can write a title that long, that's possible. And that's when I started trying to learn more things about writing poetry, trying to try a lot more stuff other than writing for love, but also writing to know myself, writing to explore new forms. Yeah. And also when I was in college, our building in USD was the building of the publication house. And then another core memory of that was that's when I discovered Filipino poets in English. Back then I only know like English writers, like old dead white poets, from the books, from the textbooks. But then when I discovered Filipino writers, parang realized now there's yeah, I think I can also write. I will try. And since there are a lot of us, a lot of them are here, I guess I will participate. That's when I discovered the Tomasian Writers Guild and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Dennis?
Yeah, oh gosh. I listened to a lot of music growing up, like R&B and hip hop, and I would read the lyrics and that would help me think about like poems or words. But maybe like I think who or what gave me permission, I feel like a lot of friends or like I don't know, community members would always kind of like tell me to like share or read out loud. Like they knew I liked listening to poetry. I often went to like open mics and like poetry events in college, but I didn't know like when I could be on the microphone. I actually I grew up very, very quiet. I was very shy. But I always had something to say. I just didn't know if I should say things. And now I'll say anything that I need to. But I guess I have a kind of funny story about like a reading. The first reading I ever had to do, I didn't know what a reading was. It was in college. I think it was 2007 or 2008. And one of like the only like Filipino professors on campus was Jody Blanco. He teaches at UC San Diego. He's still there, and he was like the only Filipino literature professor. And he was like, Janice, we're having this event, and we need more students to read with our like a guest scholar who is here from the Philippines. And I was like, I don't know what a reading is, but I'll do it if you want me to. And the poems I read were actually what became like my first book about like microchips and Filipino women and immigrant women making microchips. And so it was just so funny because I had no idea who the scholar was, you know? And then when I got to the event, Professor Blanco introduced me to Neil Garcia. And was like, this is our scholar. He's been here for 6 months and now we're doing a final reading. And I was like, I wish I had met you sooner. I have no idea what you do, you know, but now I know. Now I know what he does. And it sounds like that was a pretty big deal, right? But there were only like 10 people at the reading, and they were all people who like told me to just like go there and read something. So yeah, I'll never forget that. I didn't even know what to wear. I thought that mattered, you know? And I didn't know what to read, but it was still like a really, really good experience, you know? He was really nice. I don't know. Do y'all know him? Do y'all know him? Is that like He's like a pretty big deal, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, shout out to Dr. Neil
Yes. If
Garcia.
you're watching, hello.
That was me back in the day.
Gosh. Well, I could talk with y'all for like another 3 hours, but you know, time. We're running out of it. I guess any last things to get out of your chest before I bring us home? And feel free
Yeah,
to unmute yourself. So,
yes,
yeah, go
I want to officially gush about Taludtod for the
ahead.
record um because it's an amazing space what 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 you've been doing. um I am especially moved by how you have opened the space up to many languages. I do not know of any Filipino journal, online or print, that has your reach. Um, I have discovered provinces in the Philippines and cities I did not know existed before. There is a huge diversity in our nation that we do not seem to have the language to talk about. And I think Taludtod is a space where we can begin to talk about the many, many places and spaces and voices that come from the Philippines and its many languages. So I am floored by what you have done, and I am really humbled and glad to be part of it. That
Thanks,
was what
Lar.
was on my chest. Yeah.
Thanks, Lar. Thank you. Janice, Dennis?
I just want to say thank you. Thank you for this space. It was so beautiful. I really liked in the beginning, was it Dennis when he said good morning here, good evening there? I just thought what a diasporic moment we're having, you know? So yeah, thank you all.
Yeah, same. Uh, I was really glad actually when I was invited because oh my God, I don't really have that much space to talk about poetry and I'm really shy, but I'm trying. I mean, for the past few weeks, I guess I'm trying. And so thank you for giving poets, especially of Filipinos, to have space for their words, for things like this. And I'm really looking forward to more sa iba pang magagawa ng Taludtod. And yeah, exciting and congrats. And thank you then to Janice and Lawrence. um, uh, it's been nice talking to you both. And yeah, thank you also. And I love your work.
Yeah.
Both of you. Yeah.
Yeah. If I may also gush, it's been really a joy to curate this with my co-conspirator Pao. Just rereading your works again, diving into, the books that you've written. Um, I I felt this like really palpable thread of, we've been talking about like space and place and where and how, but if I can just quickly gush, like I love the progression of just like Dennis, your work. I feel like it's so confined in an abode and moves within that space. And then Larry, when I think of Experiment of the Tropics, I think of a city just starting and also thinking about that first poem in Highest Hiding Place. Um, which is also about a city. And then Janice, also like how your work traverses, countries and oceans and, you know, leaps, through time and space. Again, just this is a gush fest. I will say thank you and thank you again for being here, for sharing. And one more person to thank as well, behind the scenes, Pao and I's good friend Glenn Lopez, who is the technical director for this and our other events. You are a genie in a bottle. Thank you for producing this and for making it easy for us to just chat, and to all of you tuning in, I'm just taking down notes here and reading them out loud. Poetry as a precursor to the world, poetry as confession, poetry as an enactment of thought. I hope this gives you permission to write also. There's our journal that you can submit to, but of course, I would love for you to be a part of this community that we're trying to build that, tells our real version of us, whatever that means. So yeah, keep on writing, give yourselves permission to write, and don't be shy. Well, so that's it. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next month. Bye.
Dandan